world to see. Need the world to see this face, right? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's episode 216 of the one and only Keepin It Rio podcast. I am ecstatic for today's guest. We just made a good joke. It's been a long time since we've spoken. I was actually a guest on this gentleman's podcast just 3 short days ago, but we've got a lot to cover today that we were not able to cover the other day. And now, as they say, the shoe is on the other foot. So to go from a guest to a host and a host to guest, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let me welcome the founder of Better Boss, as well as many other things that we're going to learn today. Nick Peret, welcome to Keepin It Rio, buddy. How you doing?
Let's go, man. It is an absolute honor to be here. I've been a big fan, been watching you for a long time. So I'm finally in the hot seat. So let's get cooking, hey?
Yeah, the seat's not that hot. We're going to have a good time. I'll tell you, my seat's kind of warm. I'm wearing shorts right now, and I'm actually sweating because I always tell people, you know, Elvis died before I was born. Never would have had the opportunity to interview a legend like that, but here I am today interviewing a legend in the industry, and I'm going to admit, got a little bit of nerves, but that's a good thing, baby. Right? So
I like it.
Nick, like I said, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here. You have been a key person in my podcasting journey, whether you realize this or not, but I'd say it was maybe 5 years or so ago. I was a guest for the second time ever on a podcast with yourself and Randy Brothers. Mm-hmm. And that kind of got me into thinking how cool this would be if I could do my own. And here we are almost 4 years later with Keepin It Rio. But you were the second podcast I was ever a guest on. So thank you for having me back in the day when I was just a little, rookie, didn't even know what I was doing. I had a generic camera and I sounded like I was talking in a tin can. We've come a long way, and here we find ourselves today. So,
hey, that's huge, man. That's what it's all about, dude. I mean, anybody that takes the content that we create and uses it in their business for their advantage, or gets inspired to do something similar, right, and actually sticks with it and stays committed to it. I mean, to be honest, that's probably what keeps you going the most, man. So that's really exciting. I'm proud of you, man.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to do these episodes, and I love it. My goal is to do 2,500, so I am closely approaching 10% of my goal, which means I've still got 90 to go. And who knows, before it's all said and done, I may be the #1 podcast in the universe. That's obviously the goal. So we'll see how far this takes us. So
I hope so.
I always like to start this off for anybody that's watching. This is a very diverse podcast. I'm not committed to just being a roofing related show. I told you just a minute ago, I have had people from all over the world. I've had all different walks of life, all different types of characters, all different types of backgrounds. So for those that are watching this show and they're like, this guy Nick looks like he's pretty interesting, why don't you just kick this off by telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we will just run with it. And running is going to be a theme today.
I'm a Cheesehead, man. I'm a Cheesehead, diehard Green Bay Packer fan, born in Delafield, Wisconsin, about 30 minutes west of Milwaukee. So I was born in a family of trades. So my dad was an electrician. My uncle was a custom home builder. My other cousin was a plumber. You kind of name it. And I think that's where I kind of grew so fond of working with contractors, and kind of built my whole career around it, to be honest with you. It's just because it's people that I could relate to. I understood their problems, I understood the strengths, everything like that. And they're fun to work with, man. I'm telling you, it's just like with roofing, man, it's what makes my day so good, right? It makes me what loves my career is because of how much fun roofing contractors are to work with. So that's where I learned my work ethic, my relatability to the trades. And basically, I knew I wanted to work with people in the trades, but I wasn't very fond of, physical labor, all that kind of stuff, to be honest with you. I like to sit right behind the computer. So I started my career really working with the trades when I started working for Milwaukee Tool, right? So I was doing outside sales. They moved me out to San Francisco. They moved me out to Oregon. I was kind of moving all over the place, but it was really exciting, right? I mean, the company was 100 years old, and it was growing 20% year after year. They brought in a massive sales team. They brought in a ton of innovation. And it gave me an opportunity to honestly present the best product to the distributors who were selling to contractors, right? And so first off, Milwaukee Tool, Milwaukee Fuel Line, best tools in the business, all right? So if you're out that DeWalt, that Makita, let's switch you over. hit me up. We'll convert you over to that Milwaukee tool set, baby. But after that, I ended up going into tech, right? And so, which I do consider Milwaukee tool tech, right? When you're looking at the lithium ion technology and all this great stuff. But I went into the software sales. So I'm making 150 cold calls a day. I'm out here in Denver, Colorado at this point, and I'm working for this startup company. I just wanted to just get immersed in that startup feel rather than corporate, right? I wanted to see what the difference was, and I wanted to be part of that excitement, especially after living in San Francisco, right? Like I used to drive out to Steve Jobs' garage where they started Apple, right? And just sit outside of it when I was looking for inspiration, right? I would go work in the same office that Twitter was founded in, right? Like I just wanted to immerse myself in that energy, that culture, that hope, that desire, right? That like, I'm going to change the world type atmosphere. And so when I'm working at this tech company, when I'm making these 150 cold calls, about 43% of the business was contractors. So working again with contractors, I'm talking to about 80 to 90 contractors every single day. And I'm hearing their problems over and over and over and over again, right? And now I'm not even pitching the product. Now I'm trying to figure out what they all need in terms of solutions. And of course, you're always hearing lead generation, right? Lead generation is always a big one. So literally one day at lunch, I quit my job. I got up, I left, I called my buddy and said, hey, if I run out of money, will you be able to flow me some cash to pay for my rent and everything like that? So it goes for about 4 months. I'm not making any revenue. Finally start to get it, right? And at this point, we're doing a little bit of everything, right? And I've learned through my journey, offer less, right? Because you're going to be more valuable the less you offer. So in the beginning, we're doing a little bit of everything for all these different types of contractors. Fast forward, after we get a little bit of momentum, I'm hitting up people on LinkedIn saying I'll make a free video for them for their company, right? And I'm hitting up everybody who I think is a legitimate contractor, someone I would want to work with. This is where Randy Brothers comes in. So he responds, right? He said, hey, yeah, you can make one for Elite Roofing. So I'm like, all right, perfect, cool, let's do it. So I meet him at a Starbucks. I've never made a video for anybody in my life before at this point, but he did not know that. So I bring my cell phone and like a $13 tripod that I buy on Amazon the day before. And the tripod's like this big, right? And so we meet at a Starbucks. I set this thing up. It falls over. The thing breaks immediately. One of the most embarrassing situations in my life. I'm like, oh God, here we go. So he ends up being a huge Packer fan too. And we started connecting about that and fantasy football, right? It's all about relationships, right? Building relationships with people you know, like, and trust. And so we start hitting it off. He has me come over. I make the video over at his house with his own equipment and then hire my buddy to edit it. We stay in touch, fantasy football, blah, blah, blah. He said, hey, man, I'm just starting this thing called the Roofing Academy, right? And he didn't really have a website or videos or the LMS system yet. And so we started working on that. And all of a sudden that started to gain weight. And that's when we started the podcast, everything like that, right? Same growing pains that you had. We record a whole episode with no audio. We do this, right? You kind of name it. We ran into that issue, right? And all of a sudden we get to the point like you are now where it's like you got sponsors and all this kind of stuff. And we started to pick up the momentum. And we did that for, I think, 200 something episodes with us together. So, and he's still running the Start Build Grow show, right? So once that happened and my marketing company's going, basically, also we got all these members for the Roofing Academy who also need help with marketing, right? But at this point, this is where we slimmed it down. And all we did was basically commercial lead gen, and we automated the business development on the commercial side. So we were generating around like 300-ish commercial leads per week, right? And so basically what we do is we'd find the prospects, we identify, what type of properties they want to go after, everything like that. And we did everything for them. And then they would just go in and try to close the deal. Of course, we'd come in with some kind of like maintenance program, repair, right? Something to get us a foot in the door, build out that portfolio for these people to be successful in commercial. So that was where I was basically living for quite some time until I sold that about two and a half years ago now. And then it started Better Boss.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's amazing that your friendship with Randy started over that, LinkedIn post and saying, hey, bro, let me do a free video for you. Never done one before. And it develops into something so amazing like that. And you just hit the nail on the head. This whole thing, life is about relationships And I always say you're one contact away from a completely different life, a completely different outcome. You know, you could become a billionaire tomorrow. You could become broke tomorrow. It all kind of depends. And the fact that you guys are Packers fans, I mean, that's pretty cool. I like that. And I do want to give a shout out to my friends in Delafield, Wisconsin at Resistance Exteriors, Tom and Caitlin Cutts. They are awesome. They're absolutely killing it. They just bought a new office building for their company, 10 years in business. And I've been watching them grow since day one. So super proud of that. That is a wonderful community that's got a lot of great people, and you're just living proof that statement is true. So I
tell
love
them
that.
to hit me up, man. I gotta connect with some contractors out there, man. Delafield there. Tell them I grew up on Lake Negawicca.
There you go. And I'm sure Tom probably goes fishing there every Tuesday. He's one of those guys. So that's pretty awesome. I love the fact that, you know, like you say, going from a corporate type structure with Milwaukee Tools into a startup and kind of getting to experience the everyday aches and pains of a brand new organization. Let's talk just a tiny bit about that. We're going to kind of move through a lot of stuff here, but talk a little bit about that difference from having a structured company, like you said, 100-year-old brand that's recognized worldwide. You can go out and basically say, hey, look, I'm selling Milwaukee Tools, and people know what that is, versus then taking a complete leap of faith, jumping into something that nobody's heard of, nobody knows anything about. And like you said, having to find ways to inspire yourself, because I know for a fact that as someone who resurrected a dead brand here at Rio Blanco Roofing in San Antonio, it's not that easy. And sometimes it can be a little, you know, you question your sanity, you question everything you've ever done in life. So tell me a little bit about the switch and how that transition was for you. Was it everything you expected? Was it easier than you thought? Was it harder than you thought? What was that all about?
Yeah, I mean, first off, with Milwaukee, I couldn't be more thankful for my time there. I'm not meant for corporate. I knew that kind of going into it, but the amount of experience that I got firsthand to see a company grow that drastically after being established for so long, really focusing on sales development, right? Sales team, sales training, and then basically just product, right? So you're looking at R&D, you're looking at but the brand was already developed, right? I mean, everybody knows what Milwaukee Tool was, and I think you nailed it with that comment. Is because when I started to work for this startup company, as soon as you call them, the first thing they say is, "Who are you?" Right? So now all of a sudden that brand awareness that you can kind of rely on in a sales atmosphere isn't there. Right. So now you're having to create that education in terms of the brand awareness and what you do and everything like that prior to even going into the pitch. So I think it's completely different. Right. And when you're looking at processes, when you're looking at systems, when you're looking at all that kind of stuff, right, a startup company really doesn't have as much to offer there. Right. They're kind of figuring it out in the run. It's a little bit more of the wild, wild west. Right. So the freedom there is definitely going to be different too. Right. But I think in terms of the energy and everything like that, it's pretty tough to beat when you're looking at a startup company. You know, you see it with all these startup movies and shows and all this stuff on Zuckerberg and whatnot. Right, there's something exhilarating about it. I mean, when I was looking at the startup company, we had Nerf guns, we had beer kegs, we had big jumbo Tron sales leaderboard. Right. Every time you get a deal, all of a sudden your song goes off, the Jumbotron goes off, right? You got happy hours, you got all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely something fun with it. I would say when you're looking at how long people lasted there, it wasn't as long. The retention was definitely a little bit lower, but it taught me a lot of things in terms of what people do like about startups when I started to do my own, right? Because for me, it was basically trying to take a mixture of the corporate process and everything that they have structured with just like that energy and that excitement and that vision of a startup to try to mesh that together to have a startup that's a little bit more progressed and scalable and has those systems for people to be successful. Because I think that's an area where startups really struggle with, is when they don't have those systems, those trainings, those processes in place. They really struggle to retain people and make sure that people are being as successful as they can be.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you. And the thing I love about it is, like you say, the little wins are huge when you're in that environment. And it's like, hey, we got our first deal. We got our first, 6 figures. We got our first million. We're growing as a team, but it's not for everybody. And
No.
in contracting, it's the same thing. I start this company back up. It was out of business. I go find some guys that I can sell the dream to. And, I'd say of all the people that have worked with my company along the way, now I don't have any of those original people with me anymore. Some of them have gone off and started their own deals, which I'm extremely proud of. Some of them had to go back to a 9-to-5 because they just weren't ready for, the unpredictability of, hey man, we got to go out and we basically got to hunt what we're going to eat. And if we don't kill it that day, we might be hungry.
100%.
Yeah. And so that mindset is huge. And I think it takes maybe a bit of insanity, a lot of personal belief, a lot of faith, and just saying, hey man, it's got to work or else I'm kind of screwed. And with that mindset, you develop more of an entrepreneurial spirit as things continue to grow. You get things going and really start developing, and then you start your own deal. So you've basically done this a few different times. I know you've started company, sold company, started company again. Tell me a little bit about that as now going in from, hey, I'm part of a little group here. We've started something. We've built it up. I'm going to go and do this again. The second time, is it easier? Is it harder? Do you expect more out of yourself? Is the disappointment greater if you don't see the results as quickly as you think? What's the mindset when you transfer from one to the next?
That's all really, really great questions. And I before I do that, I just want to touch on one thing that you mentioned about selling the vision, right? So I think that's really key when you're looking at startups. Sometimes startups can't offer as much in the front end, right? But long term, it might be a huge reward for anybody that buys in early, right? So the key is to be able to sell that vision, right? A compelling vision, and get people to buy into that, right? And it needs to be special people who can be very adaptable with their role and skill sets to be able to, change and take on additional responsibilities or different responsibilities as roles shift and the hierarchy kind of gets built out. So having that compelling vision is so crucial. With like the last company, everybody that we hired, basically quit their job to start working for us. But what I would do is I give them a little bit of part-time work because they'd start hitting me up about it because I was trying to sell that compelling vision. I give a little bit of part-time stuff, right, to see what they're capable of doing. And then basically they were just so excited about the vision that when I said, hey, do you want to quit your job to do this? They were all in, right? So that compelling vision is definitely key. But with your question though, I would say, I'm probably 10 times smarter than I was just even a few years ago, just the amount of time that I've dedicated to my craft when you're looking at CRM systems, automations, AI, right? All these kind of things. But I would say that this business model is definitely a little bit more difficult than the first one, because it almost kind of goes hand in hand with what we were saying before with brand awareness, right? Because when I was selling commercial leads, it's like, hey, what do? We help you generate commercial leads by automating your business development. Right. It's very simplistic and everybody kind of already knows the pitch about marketing. But when you're looking at like a blue ocean strategy where, hey, you're looking at Better Boss, and I notice a massive issue with roofing contractors being able to implement, customize, train their team on all these different software systems and maximize it where it's actually an asset rather than just a liability that's not really being fully used. I'm doing basically fractional CTO, Chief Technology Officer memberships, right? And so it's an area where, hey, I know a lot of roofing contractors who have fractional CFOs, but it's a new area, right? So when you're looking at the education, the marketing, the packaging, pricing, everything like that, and how you pitch it, I think it's a little bit more difficult, but the impact can be so much bigger. So when I basically took on this new initiative or mission of mine, if you will, I knew that going in, right? But I felt like the results and the impact that we can have on the community by doing this new business was just going to be so much bigger. So it's one of those things where obviously, sometimes I get a little bit frustrated where I realize, hey, I have to switch my messaging. I have to switch this, right? Until it clicks. But I'm loving it, right? Like it's been super exciting. I mean, the results have been crazy. We've had people have their close rates go up 20%. We've seen average ticket size go up drastically. Profit boosts from up to, 5%. We're saving people, 52 days a year for some contractors where literally we're saving them every single Monday that they were doing something that we've now automated. right? So it's a lot of work, but it's one of those things where it's like, man, I think I can make a huge impact. So you just kind of deal with the consequences. And I would say it doesn't get easier, because I think what happens, you take on a tougher mission, right? A tougher challenge. And so it's one of those things where you have to kind of build yourself back up to be ready to handle that, which maybe this business I wouldn't have been able to handle, 5 years ago or whatever it might be.
Yep. And I love that, because like you say, you found something that you are going to be able to contribute. You believe 100% in the mission. Obviously, you've taken it on, but now there's another wrinkle that comes into this equation. When you're doing this as a youngster, years back, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? You just said, hey, man, I got some buddies that can float me a little bit if I can't pay my bills. But now you're in a different place in life. I know that you were recently a new father. Now you've got more responsibilities. You've got other lives that you're responsible for as well. Tell me a little bit about the transition from, oh, you know what, if this doesn't work, it'll be all right, I'll start something else, to now basically, man, this has to work because I'm going to be funding a college education. I'm going to be making sure that I'm providing the best life possible for my family. How has that transition changed the way that you look at the business, the goal setting that you put forth with it, and the way that you kind of view what the definition of success is versus, maybe just a couple years ago?
I mean, timing and everything, right, where you are in life is going to have a drastic impact on your entrepreneurial journey, right, and how you attack it. To kind of paint a picture here, if we will, my first business, I think I was 24 years old when I started it. I was living off of like $1,500 a month that my buddy was sending me. I had like an $850 apartment, 1-bedroom apartment. And I mean, I remember, working on New Year's, everybody's telling me to come out. And this was before we had a designer at the time. And I'm trying to figure out Adobe Photoshop, and I'm making these images and stuff like that in my boxers. And I'm just ripping until like 2 a.m. Right. And so that situation there, hey, I was living very, very frugal. And I also knew that I had my buddy there for backup, and that I didn't have anybody that was relying on me personally. So now when you fast forward, and I have a wife, right? We have a house, we have a baby boy that was just born. He's, a little over 3 months old. We have 2 dogs. All of a sudden now you have a little bit more of a reality check. So I would say, in terms of me trying to get to the point of, breaking even on all the time and money that I put in the front end, I made sure that I expedited that drastically, for sure. I knew there was a lot that I had to learn, right? So I used to have a team of tech people that I really relied on. I had enough knowledge for myself to get dirty when I needed to, but I had a lot to learn. So I'd spent thousands of hours on AI, every roofing CRM, any kind of automation tool you kind of name it. And so I knew that going in too. So I definitely had a little bit more pressure to go quicker, for sure, right? And so, but I would say, another thing that I took away from it is how much like your personal life also impacts your ability to perform. So I think if you're able to, as you grow and you have these different responsibilities, make sure that you're really good at taking care of your family, taking care, having family time, making sure that you're present when you're not working, doing different things that's going to be enjoyable for your family, that you're completely immersed in when you're not working, makes it a big impact too, because like it or not, your family is going to be part of the business, right? It's like Brittany's now working. My wife's working for us now as a CXO, so the customer experience officer. And that's really what her strengths are. And so getting her just involved and understanding everything and understanding what I'm going through and attacking everything as a team, right? Rather than me just doing it alone and her not really having the ability to understand or comprehend it, I think has been really big. So for me, I think I've kind of realized at this point that if you're going to be married and you're going to be doing this thing, I think it's a good idea to see if you can get them a little bit involved, so that way you guys can relate.
Absolutely. And I agree with that 100%. And if everybody's on the same page and working towards the same thing, it's going to be awesome. But I've also seen, family operations that have completely imploded as well. does this ever have any impact on your personal relationships? Is it ever, hey man, Nick, you're working too hard, or we're maybe not moving as quickly as we should, or we're moving too quickly? Do you guys see eye to eye on everything? And if not, how do you guys walk through that situation together and make sure that the wheels stay on and everything keeps moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm one of those people that I don't really need to worry about like my work ethic and staying committed and working, but I do need to work on slowing down sometimes, right? If I get too excited about too many ideas, I'll try to attack them all at once, and then I'll get really disappointed in myself if I don't accomplish everything that's probably not even possible to get done in the amount of time that I expect myself to do it, right? So I think that's something that I'm definitely hard on myself with. But with Brittany, I think dude, she is a beautiful Latina and she is sassy Latina, right? So she's a firecracker. I'm a firecracker, right? So I think just learning on how to handle two basically alphas, right, that love to attack things, making sure that our efforts are going together, right, on the same mission. And I think actually I put a lot of that on her, where she's very organized, right? She was in event planning for a long time. She managed multiple venues throughout Colorado. And so I rely on her for a lot of that stuff, right? To make sure that everybody's on the same page and kind of put that off to her. And let her have control with that, because sometimes I think I get so busy anyways in the day-to-day that it's nice to have a checks and balance, right? So I trust her with a lot of that stuff just because of her communication and organization skills.
I love it. And that's going to be the ultimate success. And this is a lifetime partnership that you guys are going to build a dynasty together. And I think it's imperative that, delegation is key, and being able to say, hey, I know you've got the best interest of everything at heart because we're in it together. I think that's the key to the ultimate success. And I definitely am looking forward to watching this grow over the course of time and seeing how everything develops for you. The last question I have about business, and then we're going to venture off into a completely different thing, is what is the strategy for your company? I know, like you said, you've built and exited multiple times with different companies and such. Is this something you're looking to be, this is going to be the legacy that I leave behind? Or are you building to get out at some point in the future and maybe start all over again and do something completely different down the road? What's your mindset when it comes to that?
So I think, entrepreneurs are just sick, crazy people, to be honest with you. And the fact that I went and I did this again, where it's kind of like my third company now, being part of starting up from the ground up, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, right? And I even talked to a roofing business broker lately on my podcast, and I was like, man, I should have just freaking bought a company, dude. Honestly, I think if I did something in the future, it would probably be purchasing rather than starting, because I think that, there's something I love about starting it, but it's definitely a big, big commitment. And, when you're looking at this, I would like this to be more of a legacy play, right? I mean, now we're looking at it where it's like, all right, my wife's involved. Dude, I have my son sitting in my lap watching me, where I'm like, dude, this kid's gonna be coding by the time he's 5 years old. So then he'll be smarter than me by the time he's 7, right? No joking. But for real though, right? It's like I didn't have any really business knowledge or like mentorship and wisdom until I was in my 20s, right? My early 20s, right? So I'm gonna be pouring that into him. I'm gonna be having him, calling appointments that we have scheduled to confirm them by the time he's 6 or 7 years old, right? Where all of a sudden now it's kind of a family run ordeal. I think that would be the coolest thing. And then if you did have interest, right, and taking it over sometime, I would love nothing more. But if he wants to do something else, that's fine too, right? But I would like to be part of driving this for quite some time. I don't have any intentions to sell it, right? I mean, obviously, I'm going to build it with the end in mind, right? Built to sell, something that is valuable if somebody ever did want it. But my mindset is to see how far we can go with this, right? I mean, right now, AI has been so big, and I just have so much knowledge and time spent on that certain area that I'm going to continue to drive that. Like right now, basically, I like to say that we're the number one AI powered partner for roofing contractors who want smarter operations, explosive growth without the tech headache, right? So we handle all the CRM implementations, we automate estimating, et cetera, right? But I would like to have some kind of product sooner than later that is an AI model specifically for roofing contractors, right? I already have a lot of stuff built out internally that I use day to day, but I'd like to be able to really help contractors leverage AI in the future, though, even more.
Yep, I think that's the future for sure. I saw John Bros was on your show not that long ago, and he said, if you don't figure it out now, 6 months from now, you're going to be 20 years behind some people. And I see the validity in that. I know a lot of people that are still kind of hesitant to jump on board with stuff because the last few years of our industry has been a massive transformation. When we got hit with COVID back in 2020 or 21, whenever that was, it seems like it was yesterday, but a lot has happened since then. We had to transition into a completely different mindset, a different way of doing things, more virtual sales presentations, more online, contract signings and things of that nature. And it hasn't really gone back to the way that it was prior to that. I know to a certain degree, it will always be there. There's always going to be that element that likes to be face-to-face with others, but we realize, hey, there's a lot of stuff here that we can do that can really help our business get better, more efficient, maybe run a little smoother, cut out some of the positions that we're maybe, investing money in that's not necessary. And I think that, like you said, that's going to be the key to the future. And I've tried my very best to at least stay up with the times as best I can. I know there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm not aware of and don't know, but I'm a roofer. I've been doing this for 27 years. So, sometimes you just can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm always open to that. And I think that's the coolest thing about what we do is just how it's changed. And there's been like a youth movement in the contracting sector where a lot of people that may have never gotten into this before realized during that time frame, hey, look, we can do this without knowing everything about how to build a roof, without understanding the nuts and bolts of the deal. And I think marketing has become a huge thing, much more than it was. And, it's really cool to see. So looking forward to watching you grow this thing. And I love the family concept. Kind of reminds me of myself. When I was a little boy, my parents back in the 80s owned a convenience store. And my dad would take me to go work in the store every day during the summer. And I would make, a lot of money during the summer as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And I think that now looking back, I kind of hated it at the time, I guess, to a degree, but not really, because it was kind of, it was fun. I learned how to do some cool things. And there were times when I was a little boy where I could be on the news and, whenever the lottery would hit a certain thing, the news people would come in and little Chuck would be out there, running the machine when he was 7 or 8 years old and doing all that cool stuff. And I think what that really developed for me was my ability to speak to people. And I've continued that throughout the course of my life. And now with the podcast, I say, I've talked to people all over the world. And in most cases, I meet them 1 or 2 minutes before we hit record and then we go. And kind of a cool thing. I'm sure that your son is going to be a leader in the upcoming generation. And that's just awesome to hear. So I love that. Let's transition off just a little bit because there are a few other things I want to talk about. I have Eric Oberempt on my podcast next week, which I told Eric, he just came out with a new book. And I said, I've had 27 authors on my podcast. Eric's going to be the 28th. And doing a little bit of research before we get on here today, I come to find out Eric's going to be the 29th author. So during a little bit of downtime, you got into writing and you've put a book out. You published a book. I want to hear a little bit about your experience because every single author I've spoken to has a completely different experience. I've had self-published. I've had people that have been published by corporate. I've had people like Jim Johnson that went up into the woods and sat there for 2 weeks, completely isolated to write his book. I've had people that have, just come up with it and put pen to paper over, a couple hours and put something out. So tell me a little bit about the idea behind it, a little bit about the process that you went through with your book. And then obviously I want to promote your book a little bit and get this into the hands of some of the people. So we'll talk about ways that people can also purchase that and become a little bit smarter. So what was it like writing a book?
I appreciate the shout out. Writing the book was it was a bucket list thing, I would say, for the most part. When I sold the last company, it's interesting. You kind of almost don't realize that your identity is like completely in the company. So you sell this business, and then you're sitting there and you're like, well, what the heck? I used to get all the phone calls. I was the go-to person, right? Like I had my routine, right? Everything was kind of invested in the business. And honestly, man, I was a little bit just lost. Of like, hey, what am I going to do next, right? And I didn't really want to just jump right back into it, right? Like I just sold the company. I didn't really want to climb the mountain just quite yet. So I needed something to kind of buy me a little bit of time and something that I could feel good about, spending that time on. So always wanted to write a book. Obviously, I'm like, hey, it sounds pretty complicated. You have to get a publisher. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. I just started researching it online, and it wasn't as difficult as I thought. Obviously writing the content was a little bit more difficult, but the formatting, everything like that, man, I was able to find an app that took all the content, formatted it perfectly for the book, and then I just used the Amazon self-publishing, right? So it was a very, very quick process, really easy, and I loved making the book. For me, the book is Startups on a Shoestring, Bootstrapping Your Way to Success. So for me, I think bootstrapping a company might be the most difficult thing that you can do in business, but it might be the most rewarding, right? Because I think sometimes when people do have a lot of funding that, they don't have the business model established enough, they don't have enough time and experience with customers to really understand what the business is. And sometimes they throw money at problems, but they don't get to understand the foundation of the business model. So when you're bootstrapping a company, it's really cool because you learn so much. You have all these new skills that you have to learn in the front end that eventually you do get to, hand off and take that hat off and give someone else to. But when you do that, you learn those positions, those roles, those responsibilities, those tasks so well that it's very easy to process out. And then from there, hand off, right? Because you know it so well. And I think some people, they don't understand the foundation of the business because they have the funding, they were able to avoid that. Sometimes they do struggle, right? But like I said, bootstrapping is the most difficult thing you can do in business. So for me, I had 2 or 3 mentors that really stood out in the beginning of me that were everything for me. I mean, if it wasn't for them, I would have been able to do what I've been able to do. And so the book was really all about teaching younger entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs who are interested to starting their own business, specifically really in that tech sector, on how to build a thriving startup, right? With their own grit, determination, creativity. And then from there, broke down the methods, the instructions, the guidance for them to actually be able to achieve that. So the whole thing for me was, hey, I wanted all those, thriving, hungry go-getters in that sector who've been in my shoes or were in my shoes, just a tool to help them reach that success that they deserve.
I think that's awesome. And I have the same mindset. I love to help people that are new to this industry, that are trying to get into it, or maybe have hit a wall and they wonder, is this worth it? What should I do next? Where can I go? And Lord knows I have made a lot of mistakes in my career. I have done just about everything you could possibly do in the roofing industry, from being a delivery driver to opening a roofing supply company in a completely different part of the country that I'd never been to before with a total stranger, to moving halfway across the country again to work for a company that I literally met the owner and talked to him for 5 minutes, and then moving down here to San Antonio and kind of resurrecting and then killing and then re-resurrecting a roofing company. I've done a little bit of everything. So I ask people, hey, if you're in this and you are not sure about what to do, ask me, and I'm happy to help anybody out, because, it's been a wonderful journey, but there have been a lot of times in my life where I've thought, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Like, just go get a job and do something, but I wouldn't be who I am. And I wouldn't be sitting here right now had I just taken that conventional path. So to anybody that's thinking about getting into it, highly recommend Nick's book. He knows what he's talking about. And yeah, that's pretty awesome. I appreciate the fact that you put that on paper so that we can help the next generation to grow into hopefully more success than what we've ever accomplished in our life.
Amen.
So
Amen.
that's tremendous. So now we're going to take a completely different turn from what we were just talking about. You and I, like I said, I was a guest on your podcast 5 years ago, have followed your journey throughout, and have really, come to appreciate and respect you for what you do. About maybe 3 months or so ago, I get a phone call from a friend, Alan Mick, and Alan reached out to me and he says, "Hey man, we're doing something with the Win the Storm conference." And I'm like, all right, Win the Storm. I'm familiar with it. I'm not going to lie. It didn't have a great reputation in my mind, but he says, "Hey, we're going to bring in some people. We're going to do some new things. We want to completely change the culture. We want to build a community around this. And we want to have some super high level people that want to contribute to it." And you were one of the people that was mentioned right off the bat. And I thought, I'm familiar with Nick. I've seen in the 100-mile June thing that we do for Diego Dante, you're the dude that somehow runs 100 miles in like 13 minutes to start the month off. And then I'm completely just looking at it going, man, I'm not going to win this year. But I respect that because you go out and do it. And you and I now are going to be involved together in a very wonderful group. And we're focusing on health and wellness. So I want to talk first a little bit about the importance of health and wellness in your life, about how that kind of centers you, how it keeps you focused, how it kind of de-stresses in situations. And then we'll talk a little bit about the conference. So tell me a little bit about this. You've got a thriving business. You're putting everything you've got into it. You got a new family. How do you find the time, number one? And why is that so crucial, do you think, to your success, not only in business, but as a human being?
Mm-hmm. It's funny. You mentioned the 100-mile June, right? And so shouts out to Diego, unbelievable job, such a great cause, right? Helping to raise money to help families be able to adopt kids because it's crazy expensive, right?
Yep.
But when I did that, man, I'll be honest with you, I was in the middle of just building this thing up, right? And so when I did that, man, I was not working out very well. For the first time in probably 10 years, I was not working out very well. The most I ran probably was five miles in like 2 years, dude. And all of a sudden I ripped out, I think it was 100 miles in like 4 days, right? But it was some kind of just drive with me. But I'll tell you this, though. It's funny. If you look at the statistics during recessions, the amount of miles that Americans runs drastically increases, right? It's almost like they're running away from the stress, right? And that's exactly what running does, right? So my knees hurt a lot more than they used to. I've torn my pec twice. I used to be powerlifting. I was doing like 365 pounds on like a 180-pound frame. Pop that thing twice. So I don't have the explosion that I used to, but I'll tell you this much. When I started my first business is when I first started getting into ultra running. I saw an interview. Joe Rogan was interviewing Courtney Dewalter, a school teacher out here in Golden, Colorado. And she ran 240 miles in Utah. And the second place gentleman was 10 hours behind her. She fell down, hit her head on a rock, couldn't see for like a couple hours, didn't know if she was sweating or bleeding, right? So I had a chance to meet up with her a couple times running in Golden. I had an opportunity where she passed me a mile 60 at one of my 100-mile runs. She had all of the camera gear, all this kind of stuff. She sponsored, super baller, but she's what inspired me. So it was amazing to be able to see her when I eventually got there. But for me, man, I like to run away from my problems, right? I like to, it's just amazing what it can do for you mentally, right? And what happens when you push yourself and you are able to accomplish these tough, difficult tasks, right, mentally and physically, it creates a new sense of belief and confidence in yourself that you can do what you say you're going to do, right? You're going to show up and you're going to get it done. So when you're able to build that confidence in yourself, I think you can take that into business, right? Because you know who you are. You know that when you say you're going to commit something, that you're actually going to get it done. Right. And then when you are stressed, I'll tell you one thing, if I got that ADHD mind, man, and my head's running 1,000,000 miles a minute, it slows it down. Right. All of a sudden you get all these endorphins, you get relaxed, right. And you get to be in more of a calm state. So for me, whenever I do focus on my health and wellness, like I said, it's a little bit different now, but I got a habit tracker, right? Every single day, I got a habit tracker that I fill out every single morning. So I know how many days I'm working out every single week, every single month, everything like that. And then that month, I give myself a fitness grade based off the data that I have, right? So I've been way more committed ever since, because I know for a fact when I am committed to that it's going to help me be better. It's going to help me be more productive. It's going to help me be more confident in meetings and stuff like that. So a lot of the things when people are talking about business, it's actually the things outside of business that are having the impact on them, good or bad, right? And they don't even realize it. So it's like, if you commit to the health and wellness, it's going to have a great impact on you, your business, the people around you, everything like that. And that's why I'm so committed to this health and wellness thing with Win the Storm.
Yep. I tell you, man, I got into a little bit of a window there in my life where I used to have a very physical job. I delivered shingles, and I was the guy that would roof load them onto the conveyor belt, or I'd be up there catching them and walking them. And you can't help but be in pretty good shape when you do that. And my habits were maybe not the healthiest in my 20s. You know, you become legally able to do some things that maybe aren't as healthy as they could be for you. And I enjoyed doing that in my 20s, but I was able to keep that physical stuff going. I started going to the gym, and then there was a window of about 5 years where I just kind of let myself go, if we're being honest. I moved down here to San Antonio, and I gained about 80 pounds. And it was just because I didn't know anybody. I wasn't doing anything. It was go to work, come home, go to work, come home. And all you could do is sit and watch TV and eat pizza or, you know, donuts or whatever. And I got a little bit heavy. And about 4 years ago, I made a decision. And it was crazy to me because this was one of the biggest moments of my entire life that was happening that sparked it. And it was maybe even more than 4 years ago now. It's probably closer to 5. I was finally going to get my first opportunity to be a featured speaker at an event. And I wanted to do that my whole life, although I really never thought I would ever do it because I was kind of afraid of crowds and things. But I got an opportunity, and I'm going to be a speaker. And what sparked me back into physical fitness was the promotional card that they put up. You show a picture of your face, and it's like, who the hell's that fat bastard, you know? And then I realized, oh my God, that's me. And it sparked me immediately. I'll never forget. I was in Tyler, Texas. The first time I saw it, I was like, no. And I got in my car. I went to the park, and I did like a 3-mile walk that day. And it became a part of my life immediately. I lost all that weight. I started putting on some muscle now. So I'm a little bit heavier than I was about a year ago. But I get up, I go to the gym 5 days a week, 3 o'clock, 4:30, 5, somewhere in that range.
Oh, bro.
And then I do a 4-mile walk. Right after I'm done, I go to the park and I do 4 miles. Last year, I did over 1,500. The year before that, for 100-mile June, I did 200 miles. And I take a lot of pride in that because, like you said, I feel much better. I feel younger than I ever have in my life. I've got more energy. I think it's helped calm me down. It's helped with my temperament and all that stuff. You know, it's super important. And then when a guy like Alan Mick reaches out, I actually met Alan through, I guess it was IRE maybe 2 years ago. David Carroll from Dope Marketing was doing a morning 5K run. And I said, sign me up. I've been running. I did a half marathon a couple years ago. I was doing some 8, 10, 12-mile runs just for fun, which I think is crazy now. But, hey, it was cool. I accomplished a lot more than I thought I could ever do. And I met Alan through that 5K run we did a couple years ago in Dallas at IRE. And we've just kind of stayed in contact. He's been on the podcast, another guy that I have a lot of respect for. So when he reaches out and says, hey, we're going to do this Win the Storm thing, I'm committing to it. We've got some great people in there, you know, and we'd like for you to be a part of it. I was very honored. But like I said, Nick, it was an event that to me did not have any value anymore. I went to it one time. It was a horrible experience, if we're being honest. And I've been to all the other roofing events. You and I the other day on your podcast kind of touched on it a little bit. You yourself hadn't been going to any of the roofing conferences or anything for quite some time now. So tell me a little bit about what piqued your interest, what gave you the motivation to say, you know what, yeah, I'd like to get in on that. And then we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff we're going to be doing. But what brought you back into it? What specifically about this group and this event triggered you to say, yeah, you know what, I do want to be a part of it?
I mean, so way back when, you know, just a couple of years ago, I guess even, I was going to all the events, man. I was going to IRE, I was going to RoofCon, I was going, with Roofing Academy, we were hosting events. Like you kind of name it, man. I was doing them all, and I got a little bit burnt out on them. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of differentiation of them. And then with Win the Storm, obviously there was like the stagnation of just like the previous ownership and branding and approach to everything and stuff like that. So I never really even thought about it. And same thing when Alan hit me up, man, I've been great buddies with Alan, his dad for quite some time, and always just had a lot of respect for them. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll hear him out. Let's see what we're doing here. And I think, once they started to do like the town hall meetings and streaming it on Facebook, and the people that they were having on it, and the input that they were having, and the way they were listening to feedback, and how they made health and wellness a big aspect of it, I'm like, okay, so there might be something here actually, right? This might be something sustainable that could stand out from a lot of the different conferences that are out there. So this is gonna be my first conference in almost 3 years I'll be going to, and I cannot wait. Also just the camaraderie, right? So when you're looking at the people that are going to the events, when you're starting to portray, brand, and market the event this way, you're attracting the right people, right? So they're attracting people I want to work with, I want to communicate with, I want to network with, I want to learn from. You kind of name it, right? So you're attracting the right people by just the messaging. So I think just the involvement and hearing everybody out and putting that on Facebook Live, right, and being so open with it, with all these great experts and whatnot, definitely kind of pushed me over the edge.
Yep. I had the exact same story. Like I said, I'd completely written it off. It was not even on my radar. If you would have told me 2 years ago that I was going to go to Win the Storm last year, I would have told you were crazy, because, I just didn't see anything there anymore. And I agree with you. The events kind of, they run their course, and everybody that does them, they're all great people. I've been to RoofCon several times. IRE was just here in San Antonio. I had a blast with that. That's kind of a little bit different event and a different environment than some of those other ones. But you go to them, and I got to participate a little bit a couple years ago in one down in Florida. Got to be a co-MC, kind of see how those events are put together. And it's very interesting. But after doing that, I lost interest as well. And it was like, what? We're going to see the same thing. We're going to see the same
people,
same deal, and yada, yada. But this has a different vibe to it. And I told Alan that. I said, the fact that a guy like you are involved, that are absolutely, reaching out to people and trying to recruit for this, that means something to me. A guy like that sees the potential in it, it really shows me, okay, this is something that I probably should be paying attention to now. And I went to it last year. I had a great time. And even then, I'm still one of those people that's a little skeptical. It's like a job interview. Obviously, the first time you talk to someone and they're trying to get hired, they're going to tell you everything great, and they're going to put their best foot forward. True. And it was like, well, let's see what happens. Let's see if it falls apart, if it ends up being a snooze fest, if it sucks. But I stayed the entire time. I enjoyed it. The speakers were different. It was refreshing. And I have no reason to think that it's going to be any different this year. I think it'll be even more invigorating, because the people that may have said last year, nah, you know what, same old, now they've got a year of history, and they say, well, wait a minute, all these people are jumping on board. They're saying how great it was last time. Maybe it's something to look at. So we're going to have a great time with that. We're in the Health and Wellness Committee together. I know we're putting up some big plans with a great group of people to do a lot of cool activities throughout the course of the event. We're going to have a gym. We're going to have some athletic competitions for contractors. I heard that there's going to be a putting green, which is a little bit more my style than beach volleyball or any of that stuff at my age. But I think that camaraderie is going to come back, and I think it's going to be infectious. And I truly believe that now, with the group that's running things, that's putting this together, I think this could come back and be, maybe the premier event in the entire industry, quite honestly. And I think a lot of people are going to jump on board and say, hey, this is cool. So looking forward to it, my friend. And you and I are going to be there. Hopefully we don't have to run 100 miles during the 3 days, because I don't have that in me. But I really appreciate having people like yourself who have shown over the years to be committed, to be dedicated, to be ethical, professional, successful, honest, all of those things that you used to describe good people, like you say, that you want to be around. And I'm looking forward to it, man. So that's pretty awesome. We are coming up, Nick, on an hour that we've been talking here. It's been a fast hour, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. I'm going to kind of wind it down just a little bit now, and I always like to ask people that are on the show. We talked a little bit about your book. It's on Amazon. People can reach you there. If someone's watching this and they want to help themselves a little bit with their business, if they want a little bit of, additional support to streamline and make things a little bit better, what's the best way that people can get a hold of or can follow you, see your journey? Tell me a little bit about the podcast as well that I want people to pay attention to and watch. So kind of how do we touch base with Nick? How do we follow him, and how do we help support vision?
Absolutely, man. Hey, I appreciate the shout out. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. So some exciting news, we're going to have a new website coming up here probably in the next couple of weeks. So right now it's betterboss.io. But when this episode gets released, I'm guessing our new domain and new website will be up. It'll be mybetterboss.ai. If you go there, you can schedule a free growth audit where I'll spend an hour with you going through your different systems and everything like that. So it's no charge. If you want to schedule one of those, that'd be great. No pressure. Either way, I'd love to connect with you and see what you're working on, what your tech stack looks like. If you have any questions about AI or automations, anything like that, please check us out there. And then for the podcast, it's Construction Tech Talk. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you kind of name it. We're out there. Big push on the roofing space specifically, with some other kind of fun guests that I think can be interesting for everybody as well.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Check all of that stuff out. I highly encourage it. You will not be sorry. Nick is one of the sharpest guys in this industry, one of the nicest guys, and this has been an absolute blast. It's been years in the making, so thank you for taking the time to be here. One last thing I need to do before we check out here is I got to give a shout out to my sponsor, Roofer. I'm sure you're familiar with Roofer.
Hey, I've been there a lot. Amazing.
Yep. Your all-in-one solution for roofing contractors, from the initial contact with your client all the way through the entire process, your measurements, your proposals, your work orders, your material orders, your invoicing, and the best part of all, your collections. Roofer handles everything, and they've been my sponsor for 3 years. I appreciate everything they do. I'd also like to give a shout out to Smart Tarp. Smart Tarp has come on board as an associate sponsor over the last couple weeks. I've got some Smart Tarps that I put out on my job site, and they definitely get some attention. So shout out to Smart Tarp. Shout out to Roofer. Thank you guys for your support. To everybody that watches Keepin It Rio every Thursday for the last 4.5 years, thank you guys. Continue to share the love, and I appreciate everybody. I always joke and say, yeah, I could still do it without you because it's my own little deal, but it wouldn't be nearly as fun, I can assure you. So thanks to everybody that watches, and I always end with the corniest tagline in the history of the world, which is, until next week, ladies and gentlemen, keep on keeping it Rio. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Nick, for being here. We're going to run a quick ad for our sponsor. Stick around, and then you and I will finish our conversation, and we'll see you guys next week.
We're Roofer. We know that managing a roofing business can be chaotic, so we created a single platform with all the tools you need to easily run your roofing business. Stop switching between multiple different softwares and experience streamlined operations from lead to payment in hours instead of days. Visit roofr.com to get started for free today.